I took a DNA test for fun and discovered my 14-year-old daughter wasn't biologically mine. Then I tested my sons. None of my 3 children share my DNA, and my wife of 15 years knew the entire time. Before we start, don't forget to subscribe and like. It really helps the channel grow. Thank you. My name is Michael Patterson, and I need to tell you about the day a simple ancestry DNA test destroyed my entire family when I discovered that none of my 3 children were biologically mine, and my wife had known this the entire time and never told me. It started innocently enough. My daughter Emma, who was 14, asked if we could do those ancestry DNA kits together because her class was doing a genealogy project and she wanted to trace her family history. I thought it sounded fun, so I ordered kits for me and Emma and my 2 sons, Jake, who was 12, and Noah, who was 9. My wife, Sarah, declined, saying she wasn't interested, which should have been my first warning sign. We did the tests and mailed them in, and a few weeks later, I got an email saying my results were ready, and I logged in excited to see what I'd learn about my heritage. The ancestry information was interesting. I was mostly Irish and German, which matched what I knew about my family. But then I noticed a section called DNA relatives, and it showed people who'd also taken the test and shared DNA with me. Emma wasn't on the list. I thought it must be a mistake. Maybe her test hadn't processed yet. So I checked her account using the family access I'd set up, and her results were there. But when I looked at her DNA relatives, I wasn't on her list either. I called the testing company and explained there must be an error because my daughter wasn't showing up as related to me, and the representative said, "Very carefully, sir, our tests are extremely accurate. If someone doesn't show up as a DNA match, it means you don't share genetic material." And I said, "That's impossible. She's my daughter. I was there when she was born." And the representative said, "I understand this must be confusing, but you should discuss this with your spouse." I hung up feeling sick and checked my son's results, which had just come back, and neither of them showed up as DNA matches to me either. 3 children, none of them biologically mine. I sat at my computer staring at these results, trying to make sense of them, and the only explanation was that Sarah had cheated on me not once, but 3 times with 3 different men and gotten pregnant each time and never told me, and let me raise these children believing they were mine. When Sarah came home from work, I showed her the DNA results, and her face went completely white. "I can explain," she said. "Explain how none of our children are actually mine? How you've been lying to me for 15 years. She started crying these big dramatic sobs and said, "I never meant to hurt you. It just happened." It happened 3 times with 3 different men. I was confused and unhappy, and I made mistakes, and when I got pregnant, I didn't know what to do, so I just pretended the babies were yours. You didn't know what to do? You could have told me the truth. We could have dealt with it together. Instead, you let me bond with these children, love them as my own, spend 15 years as their father, all while knowing they weren't mine. But you are their father. Biology doesn't matter. You raised them. You love them. They're yours in every way that matters. Except they're not. You stole my choice to decide whether I wanted to raise another man's children. You've been lying to me for 15 years. I demanded to know who the biological fathers were, and Sarah finally admitted that Emma's father was her boss at the company where she'd worked 15 years ago. Jake's father was a guy she'd had a brief affair with from her gym, and Noah's father was someone she'd met at a conference. 3 different men, 3 different affairs, 3 children, none of them mine. Did you ever love me? I asked her. Or was I just a stable guy you could pin your children on? Of course I loved you. I still love you. These mistakes I made don't change that. But they did change everything, because how could I trust anything she said when she'd been lying to me for our entire marriage? I moved out that night and stayed with my brother while I tried to process what I'd learned. The hardest part was figuring out what to do about the kids because I loved them desperately. They were my children in every way except biologically, but every time I looked at them now, I'd see Sarah's betrayal. I consulted with a lawyer who told me that legally I was their father since I was married to Sarah when they were born and my name was on the birth certificates. But if I wanted to walk away, I could potentially terminate my parental rights and end my obligation to pay child support. "But do you want to walk away?" the lawyer asked, and I didn't know how to answer because part of me wanted to punish Sarah by leaving her alone with 3 kids to raise, and part of me couldn't imagine abandoning the children I'd raised for 15 years. My brother told me I should demand paternity tests to confirm the DNA results weren't wrong, but I knew in my gut they were right. It explained too many things I'd ignored over the years. Like how Emma had dark brown eyes when Sarah and I both had blue. How Jake had curly hair when neither Sarah and nor I did. how Noah had this distinctive cleft in his chin that no one in either of our families had. The signs had been there, and I'd ignored them because I trusted my wife. I went back to the house to talk to the kids, and it was the hardest conversation I've ever had. Emma, who was 14, understood immediately what DNA test results showing I wasn't her biological father meant, and she started crying and asking if I was going to stop being her dad. I don't know what I'm going to do, I told her honestly. Right now, I'm very hurt and confused, and I need time to figure things out. Jake, who was 12, kept asking if this meant he was adopted, and I explained no. His mother is still his mother, but I wasn't his biological father, which was different from adoption. Noah, who was 9, didn't really understand what was happening, but he could tell something was very wrong, and he kept asking if I still loved him. I'll always love you, I told him, and I meant it even though I was devastated and angry and felt betrayed by everyone. Sarah tried to convince me to stay, said we could work through this in counseling, said she'd do anything to save our marriage, but I was done. I filed for divorce and demanded full financial disclosure because I wanted to know if she'd been supporting these other men or if they'd been paying child support without my knowledge. It turned out all 3 biological fathers had no idea their children existed. Sarah had never told any of them she'd gotten pregnant from their affairs. My lawyer contacted them through the information Sarah provided, and their reactions varied. Emma's biological father, who was now in his 50s and married with other children, wanted nothing to do with her, said it was too late to establish a relationship, and he wasn't interested in disrupting his current family. Jake's biological father was shocked, but wanted to meet Jake and potentially be involved in his life. Noah's biological father had died 3 years ago in a car accident, so Noah would never have the chance to know him. The DNA revelations devastated the kids in different ways. Emma was angry at Sarah for lying and angry at me for considering leaving, and she started acting out at school, getting in fights and skipping classes. Jake was confused and curious about his biological father, but also scared of what that relationship would mean. Noah just wanted everything to go back to normal and couldn't understand why it couldn't. I decided ultimately that I couldn't abandon these children who I'd raised and loved, even though they weren't biologically mine. They were innocent victims of Sarah's deception, just like I was. But I also couldn't stay married to Sarah, so we proceeded with the divorce and worked out custody arrangements. Sarah fought me on custody, saying I had no legal right to the children since I wasn't their biological father, but my lawyer argued that I was their legal father through marriage and had acted as their father for their entire lives, and the court agreed. We got joint custody, and I continued to be their dad in every practical sense, even though the biological connection wasn't there. The financial aspect was complicated because I'd been supporting these children for 15 years believing they were mine, and now I was essentially choosing to continue supporting someone else's children. Some people told me I was crazy to stay involved, that I should walk away and let Sarah deal with the consequences of her lies, but I couldn't do that to the kids. Emma eventually warmed back up to me once she realized I wasn't abandoning her, and we started rebuilding our relationship. She met her biological father once, but he was cold and distant, and she decided she didn't need him in her life. I was her real dad regardless of genetics. Jake formed a relationship with his biological father, and now splits time between both families, which is complicated but seems to be working okay. Noah just knows that his biological father died before he could meet him and seems content with having me as his only dad. My relationship with Sarah never recovered because the betrayal was too deep. She tried several times to get back together, saying we could move past this if I just forgave her, but I couldn't forgive 15 years of systematic lying. Every time I'd made decisions about our family, about finances, about the future, I've been operating on false information, and she'd let me. My family and friends were divided in their reactions. Some supported my decision to stay involved with the kids and praised me for putting their needs above my hurt. Others thought I was being taken advantage of and should walk away from Sarah's mess. My parents struggled with the idea that their grandchildren weren't biologically their grandchildren, but they loved the kids and continued to be involved in their lives. The hardest part was dealing with my own feelings of betrayal and loss, because I'd lost the biological connection to my children and the trust in my marriage all at once. I grieved the biological children I'd thought I had, while also maintaining relationships with the actual children I was raising. My therapist said it was one of the most complex emotional situations she'd dealt with because I was simultaneously mourning and parenting the same children. Dating has been complicated because explaining to potential partners that I have 3 children who aren't biologically mine, but who I'm raising anyway, tends to raise a lot of questions. Some women see it as a green flag that I'm committed and caring. Others see it as a red flag that I'm tied to a messy situation with my ex. I'm okay being single for now while I focus on the kids and my own healing. Sarah has not been in another serious relationship because our social circle essentially ostracized her when the truth came out. People were disgusted that she deceived me for so long and let me raise 3 children who weren't mine without ever giving me the choice. She lost friends and faced judgment everywhere she went and eventually moved to another state to start over. The kids visit her during school breaks, but they primarily live with me because I provided the stability and honesty they needed after their mother's lies destroyed our family. People sometimes ask if I regret doing those DNA tests, and the answer is no, because living in ignorance wasn't better than knowing the truth, even though the truth hurt. At least now I know what I'm dealing with and can make informed choices about my life and relationships. Emma is now 17 and getting ready for college, and she calls me Dad and introduces me as her father, and the biological connection doesn't matter to her anymore. Jake is 15 and splits his time between me and his biological father and seems well-adjusted despite the complexity of his situation. Noah is 12 now and barely remembers a time when our family was intact. This is just as normal. I'm proud of all 3 of them for surviving their mother's deception and my subsequent crisis and coming out relatively okay on the other side. My biggest regret is that I didn't figure out the truth sooner, that I spent 15 years believing something that wasn't true, but I can't change the past. All I can do is move forward being the best father I can be to these 3 kids who didn't ask to be born into such a complicated situation, but deserve love and stability regardless of biology. And that's exactly what I'm trying to give them, even on days when I'm still processing my own pain from Sarah's betrayal.